This property is completely off-grid, and one of the first things we needed to do when we set up this massive polytunnel and our gardens was to sort some kind of water source. To start with, we used the pond that was nearby, but that became problematic fairly quickly with it being full of silt, and so the next option was to set up some kind of water catchment off this massive polytunnel sort of setup. It covers 100 square metres, which is about 1,000 square feet, so it's quite a decent sized one. But no matter how big your polytunnel or your tunnel house or your plastic tunnel, whatever you want to call them, you can still capture water off them, and you can capture a surprising amount of water off even small roof if you manage to set up a decent gutter system. So today I'm going to run you through my gutter system that we have set up on here. It is about the second or third iteration of the gutter that we've put in, and I'll tell you the pros and cons of it and some alternatives that you might like to look at. Of course, a tunnel house has a cover right over the top, which means the plants inside are not getting the benefit of the rain in the same way, and you may well find that if you've got a large tunnel house or polytunnel, you may well find that you're having runoff issues with huge amounts of water being dropped either side of the tunnel, which can cause some problems with the foundation pegs because the ground right there can become quite soggy. So of course the solution to both of these problems is to capture that water, and then you can use it either using a solar pump or even a normal plug-in electric pump to be able to water your tunnel house or water your other plants when you need to. With where we live, we do get a surprising amount of rain over the winter, which is the perfect time to fill up the water bins out the back. We also get a huge amount of wind, and while we bought the wind kit and all the extra supports for this tunnel, we have had to make some additional changes to it to help strengthen it against the wind. One of those is to add this hip board that runs right along through here, that white wood. It's actually some old decking that we got for free from somebody, and we have bolted it to the metal frame. On the upside to doing this, it gives us a surface that we can then attach our gutters to on the other side. A lot of high tunnel, polytunnel designs all come with a wooden hip board. This particular one doesn't. But we've added it in, and I'm really glad we have. All we did before we put the plastic on was measured the lengths and made sure that they reached between where the upright poles are so that we could bolt them. If there are any joins, we've sort of scarfed them together with a couple of bits of wood so that we're only having to bolt once through all of the uprights, because the last thing we wanted to do was also weaken those poles. We did use a laser level to try and make that line nice and level, but the funny thing about the way this tunnel works is you put it all up, you put the plastic on, and then you actually lift the poles a bit further before you tighten them down, which tightens the plastic. Does that really well, but it did mean that our hip boards were no longer level. They're a bit wibbly wobbly, but we were still able to attach a gutter that perfectly works fine for them. One of the more expensive things you have to buy is actually the guttering itself. As you can see, ours doesn't sit perfect along there because of just the shape of the way the tunnel house is now that we had to stretch the plastic. However, it does work. It's higher at this end, lower at the faraway end. It's just bog standard PVC, just normal house guttering. Made sure we got the ends, make sure we use the right sealant stuff to attach the ends so it doesn't leak. And the next thing we used was, the first time I tried to do it, I tried just taping it on, because what you've got to do is get the water to be able to run from this top surface and somehow get into the gutter. I have seen some people use a hip board on the inside and then like an angled piece of wood on the inside as well that kind of pushes the plastic out and creates like a drip edge for it to drip down. My big concern with doing something like that was the amount of wind we get here. Everything flexes and moves so much. I didn't want the plastic from the outside of the tunnel house rubbing constantly on a piece of wood. It would eventually just rip a hole in it. So this is our alternative option. Works really well for those high wind areas. So what I have got is a spare piece of, this is just the same plastic that the tunnel house is built with, and then this is some black, I think it's PVC sealing tape. It's quite wide. It's essentially the same stuff that electrical tape is made of, but it's really wide. We do have to replace it about once a year, but it is lasting really well in between times. Ideally I would use white stuff. There is a risk of course with black tape with it getting too hot and causing holes or something in your high tunnel if your place gets that hot. Ours does not. So all I have done really is put this big wide piece, I think it's about 6 inches, which is, what's that, 150 mil, wide piece of this plastic. I've taped it really carefully to the top. Anywhere that there's a wrinkle like this, the water will go down behind and the tape will stop sticking. So the idea is to get it as smooth as you can, and then you can tape it intermittently along the gutter. So this means the water can run down through here, it hits the tape, which is generally quite well sealed, down onto your plastic and down into your gutter. I've seen a few different iterations of this. I'm sure if you have like proper fancy tape that's designed for greenhouses, maybe that would be better to use. Personally, I can't afford to buy it. It's almost $100 a roll, whereas this stuff's like $5. So the water, of course, flows down into here and heads along that way, which does drop down. If I'd done this again, I would have put the water tanks at this end, because that's the way that the tunnel house naturally flows. It's the way the ground flows, but that's alright, we've got them at that end. So I've just used a flexible like drainage pipe, I guess it is, that clicks into the end of the gutter and goes into 2 of these separate IBC totes. And then I've also used some to do an overflow that then drains into a drainage ditch that we have. One day I want to turn it into a swale and block the other edge, but for now it's just a drainage ditch. And then part of the joining pipe at the bottom, I have also added some clear pipe that pokes up at the top. And so as long as it stays vertical, don't let it fall down. I have had to tie it on. I may have lost 2 entire IBC totes of water because the pipe fell down in the wind. But it's clear, and so it means you can easily see what level the water's at, which during the winter is not so needed, but during the summer is quite helpful. And down here, these just screw on. This is, I think it's 20 mil, like 3/4 inch pipe. I don't think I got the 25, maybe it is the 25, maybe it is 1 inch pipe. Just a whole lot of connectors, and they just tee onto each other all the way along. And you'll notice all of these bins, we've taken them all out and wrapped them all in black plastic so that we don't have algae growth issues within the tanks. It's really easy to do. You just unscrew these bolts here on both of them, click this off, and then that whole plastic bladder comes out, and you wrap it in just black polythene. I use that same black tape, pop them back in, screw those back on. And so the gutter comes down, it's got just the wee 90-degree bend, and then it clicks onto this flexible drainage hose here, and I've just got them going into the tops, and I've taped around them so the wind can't blow them out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So this is 9,000 litres, which is a little bit more than 2,000 gallons, and it's currently overflowing full. You can tell because this overflow hose here is heavy and full of water. This other side I've done exactly the same thing. It goes, tees down into this, off the edge of the gutter, and this is just a wet drain, so it just stays wet. There's always water in here, and it just runs along the ground so I don't trip over it, and pops up into the tank at the other end. There's our solar panels. This larger one directly runs these ventilation fans here. So whenever the sun's out, the fans are running. While we're here, I thought I'd quickly show you my pump setup. This is just a little, I think it's called a C-Flow. It's a little 12-volt pump, and it hooks up the intake, goes out the back corner, excuse the mess, out to the tanks. And obviously that's the intake, the outlet comes down, and we have a series of drip tape set up for everybody in here with feed out lines of the, I think it's a 1/2 inch poly. And then we've got a very basic solar charger which the pump runs into, so it's got an on-off switch here. I think that solar charger was like $10 or $15, and it runs off a little 12-volt car battery that was too stuffed to use in a car. Works perfectly fine for this setup. And then outside we just have a little, I want to say it's 100 watt, I'm pretty sure it's 100 watt solar panel just sitting out in the sun that we've got. I've got it screwed obviously to the ground because of the wind we have here, but the power runs through to the solar charger, down to the battery, and then also from the solar charger to the pump, and then we can just turn it off and on, and it pumps through and waters everybody. And I was really surprised it runs the drip tape for this whole place. Even if I have it all turned on, this wee pump can manage it. It takes a wee while, but it can manage it. So During the heat of summer, I will run that pump for about an hour to an hour and a half a day, often splitting that into 2 feeds, one in the morning, one at night. During winter, I'm barely having to do it all. The very front corner does get a bit dry, so probably once or twice a week I'm running it for half an hour. But that wee solar panel and the broken battery is perfectly fine to run this pump, and the pump itself was under $100. I want to say it was maybe 50, and that's New Zealand dollars, so you're probably looking at 30 or 40 US dollars for one of those. Another alternative to using fresh rainwater to water your tunnel house is to use grey water, which I have done a video about, a really basic grey water setup up here, which you're welcome to check out. So I hope you found that helpful. If you've got any questions or if I missed any important information, please chuck them down in the comments below. Thanks for joining me on this video. I will catch you in the next one.